Kind of got to ask yourself, do I want to fight really, really hard to get to that managing director role and start playing the corporate politics at full scale, which is, I thought, from what I was observing, actually not super interesting to me. I got paid like market price roughly, and the upside was for me to jump out of a corporate and join a company with that level of uncertainty was obviously having shares in the business. But you got to think, obviously, what is not cash in a startup, could be nothing, right? Generally, unless your company, your startup is really successful, if you look at the pure cash, chances are you're gonna miss out compared to a career in corporate. Yeah, it costs money, but I think absolutely no regrets on what I've learned. I think what I was able to discover also about myself and others, the people I met, and the experience, it goes far beyond the financial case. I don't think I would have been as happy as I am now with what I can do and what I do today.
Hi everyone, my name is Varya and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast that helps high-achieving professionals redefine success on their terms and build careers they truly love. As always, please do give a thumbs up to this episode. It really helps the podcast reach new people. In today's episode, I want to compare and contrast the corporate, startup, and entrepreneurial paths, so that anyone who may be choosing between these three options can make a more informed decision. And I'll be discussing this topic with Damien Kopp, who has experience across all of this entire spectrum. Damien spent 11 years at Accenture, then joined a startup which turned out to be a totally different experience from what he expected. And after that, he decided to plunge into entrepreneurship. And in this conversation, we're going to compare these three paths in terms of everything: finances, lifestyle, and type of work. So Damien, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Varya. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start with part one, corporate path. Can you tell me, when you joined Accenture, what was your expectation? What did you want to get out of this corporate path? And we can then discuss what happened next and why you decided to change course.
Yeah, look, I think in the early days, being a young graduate, I think what mattered to me quite a bit was, I guess, the big brand and a nice logo on my resume. And I think I wanted also to have the opportunity to move around the world as well. And I thought that joining a global company that had offices in 100 plus countries in the world, as well as a big name in a consulting landscape, I thought was a good way for me to get started.
And obviously you spent 11 years there. Do you remember a moment when you started thinking, okay, maybe a corporate path is not for me and I want to try something different? Can you tell me about this time and what prompted this type of thinking?
Few things happen is the first few years, obviously, in consulting, what's I think truly amazing and interesting is you get to interact with a lot of different people, you get to expose to different projects, different problems, you get to learn a lot. So I started my career at the Paris office, and then I moved to Toronto in Canada, and then I moved to Singapore. So I managed to do like 3 different places. Not that the transfers were actually very easy to manage. I'd be lying if I said it was very easy, but the point is I managed to do that. So there was a tremendous amount of diversity, I think, in the kind of situations we had to handle, and therefore the learning and I think the career progression was actually extremely stimulating. The workload was insane, but after probably 6-7 years or so, I ended up doing a bit of a burnout. So I'll explain the consequences of that. But point is, a lot of work, but a lot of great opportunity, great colleagues. A lot of them still friends today. So it becomes actually a very interesting kind of network and great relationships that have survived now many years, because I left more than 10 years ago now. And again, I think the ability to progress and learn. Now, obviously, after a while, and as you get more senior, it's a pyramid, right? Consulting is a pyramid. So there's a lot of people at the bottom, and the saying in consulting is up or out. So you move up or you're out of the organization. So lucky enough, and with a lot of hard work, I guess, managed to kind of climb up the ladder. And at some point, obviously, there are less seats available, a bit less opportunities. And also, I think there's an expectation that you're going to start replicating a lot of stuff you've done already. And so you feel like you're kind of plateauing a little bit. And that's where you start to ask yourselves, okay, well, it's not as stimulating as it was. I'm not learning as much as I used to. I start to see a lot more of the politics as well, which I didn't see much before. And so you end up in that situation where you kind of got to ask yourself, do I want to fight really, really hard to get to that managing director role and start playing the corporate politics at full scale, which is, I thought, from what I was observing, actually not super interesting to me. I was still very much wanted to be in the content, wanted to be, close to clients. I didn't want to just sit in an office and, argue about numbers and manage very large teams to do so. So I thought I was getting a bit bored, I'd say. And that's where I guess I got headhunted for an opportunity to join a startup. And after a lot of back and forth, I decided to jump the bandwagon at the time.
And there are so many ways that we can go from there. But I guess, how did you think about the trade-offs? Because obviously the obvious trade-off, right, is if you stay in the corporate environment, even with all the things that you've mentioned around plateauing growth, about politics, it's still a stable, safe, very respectable career. How did you think about giving all of this up? And at which point did you realize that actually other things outweigh all these positives of a stable corporate career?
Yeah, you're right. So there were things I knew I didn't want, but it was quite hard for me to figure out, what I really wanted. So when the opportunity showed up to join I would say, kind of established startup, so not brand new, 3-4 years old, had already a lot of customers, had done multiple rounds of funding, was already 100 people, had enormous ambition to kind of scale much further. And so to me, the consideration was obviously, number one was the financial risk, which is, am I able to jump into this organization, one, knowing that there's a level of uncertainty that I need to be able to take on. And one is financial for sure. What's funny is at this point, what I mentioned earlier about having a big logo on my resume, all that stuff didn't matter to me anymore. It was about whether I'll be able to have an impact in this role and where there an opportunity to build. I really discovered that I think what really was stimulating me the most was, one is the problem solving, which is why I think consulting fit me for so long. And second was be able to build stuff to effectively solve problems at a certain scale. So the opportunity to join this company seemed to be, interestingly, low risk. That was my assessment at the time. After many conversations with, beyond the headhunters, I met the management team as well, met the CEO, I met the investors, and I realized, it looks like, the company is already there, has done a lot of validation, market validation. Now they really want to grow further. And I feel like, to be honest, I haven't grown a company from 0 to 1. So I'm pretty happy to take it from 1 and try to bring it to, 5 or 10. I thought that was really, really interesting, really appealing. And he was in a space that I knew. He was in payment. So I was pretty happy with that. And I thought I had the right domain knowledge. I had the right technical knowledge. And I think the professional management skills to kind of bring the team to the next level. So that was the considerations at the time. Needless to say, it didn't happen that way, but that's how it started. And that was kind of my mindset at the time when I decided to to make the jump, which was, it took me a while, a bit of convincing from the headhunter to kind of to push me a little bit and realize actually that's maybe the one opportunity I was waiting for.
Before we deep dive into your startup experience and what went as you expected there, what went wrong, let's take stock of your corporate experience. Obviously, you have been going up the ladder alongside some of your peers. What patterns did you observe among them? So what type of people were happiest in this type of environment, and what type of people were a bit similar to you and at some point they felt like they want something else? Like, did you see anything interesting and any patterns or trends that you can highlight?
Obviously, a common thread is the lack of career progression and opportunities. And so people start to look around because they're not progressing. For some of them, it's not the industry, it's not the job, it's the lack of recognition and the speed of career progression. So they end up usually joining a competitor at a higher a job grade, and that makes them happy. They get the recognition, and that's perfectly fine. Then you probably have maybe another type of people who are going to be looking at whether they have the right boss, the right type of projects, and they're fairly comfortable, I think, in a corporate landscape where there is a level of support. There is a kind of we often say that, a job is kind of a social activity, right? So some people need that kind of cohesive kind of support layer. They know how to navigate the system, and they're comfortable being in a big structure where they feel safer in a way. And I see a lot of people who don't want to take the risk to go out because they feel it's safer to stay inside like a big corporation, that they'll be taken care of.
So having had all these experiences of plunging into startup world, entrepreneurship, would you say this risks and this risk aversion is justified? And if yes, what do you think is the best time to make this move then? Is it early in your career before you get responsibilities? Any tips around timing?
Look, it's a tough one because one is whether it's quite of a personal choice in terms of, one, again, is your risk appetite based on the life stage you're at. Second is, there are pros and cons. People are going to say, I'm going to learn more joining a startup, and then it's better when I'm younger because I have nothing to lose from a career perspective, and I can always go back to corporate later on. But you also see corporate people joining startups very late, 35, 40, 45 years old, and they come with a wealth of experience. So depending on the stage of the startup, it brings actually a lot of value as well. So I'm not sure there's a right or wrong. Personally, I'm very happy with the choices I made. That I think I was certainly not ready younger to join a startup. I think I needed to have a little bit of experience and structure of the work life in general. And I think I was happy to have that learning and that experience to be able then to apply it and unlearn some of that when I joined the startup world, where things were a lot more hectic, but I knew what, a structured, established, large scale kind of technology project would look like. And suddenly I had to, learn a lot of things to make it work, but I knew how, directionally how an established business would look like. And I thought that was helpful also because the startup I work with, they were all B2B startup. And what it means is you're selling to enterprises. So you're selling to people that I was, I think, able to relate to because I had been working with them and I had been in one myself. So it's a lot easier, I think, to understand this world if you have been part of it before.
And based on your experience of startups and entrepreneurship, would you say that risk aversion is justified, that indeed, it is a risky business to step out of a corporate into this world, right?
I think that's where maybe I've evolved a little bit. I don't think a corporate job is safe anymore, to be honest.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it used to be true. I think the challenge is, look, if you're staying just because you want to be safe and suddenly you're being let go, you are so unprepared, because you were feeling safe, you have a network, you have not explored other opportunities, you don't know how much you're worth outside, you haven't even asked yourself what else you could do, you haven't tested out the market. And that's what's dangerous, because feeling safe doesn't mean you should have option B and C and D lineup. And I think maybe that's the biggest difference between someone who's putting him or herself out and decide to make a jump is someone who's been in a startup has always 3 or 4 plans ahead. And I think it would benefit a lot of people working in corporations, and again, feeling safe, because when the big layoffs happen, and we've seen that unfortunately in many industries, in many regions in the world, no one's been spared, right? And so what do you do then? You'd better be ready. So how do you get ready? Don't feel safe and be in control, because if not, you're going to be passively having to go through something that's imposed upon you as opposed to something you decide. And it's really hard when you have to navigate such a hard situation that you had not planned, you don't know how to handle, and you become desperate very quickly, because what's at stake is obviously your financial security and your family. And so that becomes dramatic pretty quickly. But if you're in that mode where you control your destiny as much as you can, you create optionality, whether you're in a corporate or in another company doesn't really matter, to be honest. Is you're in control of your career and you're in control of your destiny. So plan for as if you could be fired, whether it's a startup or a corporate, but you got to own it. You got to own it, and you cannot expect, your boss or the system to take care of you. I think that's maybe the biggest thing I've learned through the process is just, take care of your own career and don't expect anybody else to manage it for you, because nobody really cares but you in the end.
And we are not even touching upon this big topic of AI, which obviously will have some impact on the job market. We will touch upon your business, and you work with tech a lot. But while we are on this topic, do you have any views on how AI is going to impact the job market based on what you see and based on how corporates are adopting AI right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of anxiety about what AI will do to the job market, and especially for what we call like the knowledge workers or the white collars, that their job is going to be, replaced, eliminated at large scale in a very short time frame. I don't really buy this. Look, I work with the technology and I implement it as a living. I can tell you that first is if, you kind of look at how your day looks like today, and how much is what you do could be actually done by AI today. And there's not 50% of what I do that could be replaced, because a lot of it ends up being about people, right? And it's about managing relationships. It's about obtaining buy-in. It's about explaining to others. It's about building awareness. And unless you're managing a fully AI-based company just made of robot, where you can just send instructions for them to follow, so you're basically managing robots, I don't really think AI can replace an entire workforce that way. Now, is it changing the way I work? Yeah, the answer is yes. It helps me be more productive. And I think you got to embrace what it can do and what it can do well. There's another aspect I think that's quite important, is for an enterprise to adopt the technology at the scale it will have such impact at 50% cut in and layoffs. The technology has to really work. And the reality is today, the technology is either not accurate enough, not fast enough, or too expensive to run at the scale that people make you want to believe that, you're going to be out of a job in 2 years. You could argue, yeah, it's evolving very quickly. All these problems are going to be solved. I'm like, if you look at the time it takes for companies to adopt new technologies and to change and transform, it's not a 2-year cycle, right? Companies still using Excel. 20 years ago, I was building business intelligence solutions, and people were promising that people would be able to ask questions about anything about the business and they'll have all the answers. 20 plus years later, we're still at the same point where, oh yeah, we have the data, but it's a mess. I need a data lake. I need a data warehouse. I need a business intelligence layer. Again, it's transformative, but I think the time horizon for the impact that we're looking at is much further out for enterprises. And an enterprise cannot adopt a tech that works sometimes, that hallucinates sometimes, right? You just don't get away with it. Your financial report has to be right. You cannot say, oh, sorry, investors, sometimes it may be wrong. This doesn't work, right?
Amazing. So let's move on to your startup experience. So obviously you've mentioned that after Accenture, you plunged into the startup environment. You joined the startup that looks promising to you. Can you tell me what it was like in practice? And a sneak peek, I know that it was the opposite of what you expected. So can you tell me more about that?
I joined a company. I mentioned the startup was about 4 years old, had about, I think, more 35 clients, banks, so B2B clients across 20 markets. There were 110 people. Probably 70 or 80 of them were technologists. So effectively my team, because I joined as the CTO then. And they were, obviously the ambition was to, I guess, improve revenue, improve the product, improve the delivery, and obviously be able to grow the business massively. I think the realization fairly quickly was the business model that wouldn't scale the way it was actually set up. So again, it was a payment company, so selling hardware, payment terminals paired up with phones. There was a component to obviously sell the hardware and get revenue from that, and the other part would be to get transaction fees once the readers would be deployed in the field and used by merchants in emerging markets. And the readers were obviously sold, so that created revenue, but then they were not deployed, or they were not deployed fast enough. So all the upside, the transaction-based pricing that we had set up would not come in. There was just not enough transactions to cover our cost and to see any significant growth potential in that. Plus, for every implementation, the product had been kind of spinned off in different versions. That created massive overhead for the engineering team. So instead of having a single platform to manage 20 clients, we had 20 versions of the same product. Because we rushed it and because it was not well managed, we ended up having so many different branches and versions that created a lot of trouble for us. So again, when I started doing that, I started to realize, so first of all, the revenue and the scalability is a problem. Second of all, the engineering part has a big problem. And third, I guess, was, obviously the team and the organization, the talents, was how do we get that fixed up and organized to have, a high performing team to handle that. So my immediate learning, if I reflect back, was the time it took me to. So the diagnosis was pretty quick. Like I knew what was wrong. Mm-hmm. I think I was still in kind of the, I guess, big corporate mindset to say, well, we're going to create this plan. And I thought we had time. And my time scale was still like, a few months, few weeks, a few months to make certain decision. A low performer in the team, I would say, well, let's give him a chance. Maybe he was not well managed. And there's a lot of decisions I think I should have been able to make a lot faster. I don't know if it would have saved the business, but I think it could have had at least a bigger impact faster. So the first learning is really on time scale. The one thing you have as a small organization, as a startup, is the time can work for you compared to all these big organizations. So you have to use time as a major asset, because time is money is runway, and is life or death ultimately. It is really life or death. And so if you don't make these decisions quickly, you can be wrong, but you have to fix it very quickly, because the only thing you have for yourself, again, is time and money. So to me, that was the big realization. And I think I was too slow at making some of the decisions, maybe not aggressive enough on executing on these decisions so that I could have an impact a bit faster.
And do you think there is also some learning about due diligence of startups? Like if you were speaking with someone who's in a corporate environment and who's thinking about jumping into a startup, what type of due diligence should they do? And what tips would you give them on that front to make sure that you're choosing the product that that whatever your startup is telling you is actually what is happening in reality? What's the best way to check that?
Look, again, reflecting back, I had met the management team. I had met the investor even prior to accepting the job. Obviously, everyone is trying to sell you the dream, right? So it's quite biased. Maybe one thing that I would recommend is, and I should have done as well, is talk to former employees. So track them on LinkedIn, look at who's left, who would have, maybe they'll be a bit bitter. So again, you take with a grain of salt what they're going to tell you, but it'll give you maybe a more balanced view on the reality of not just the business model and whether it's going to work, but, the people as well, and generally how things have been working, right? Whether there's good work ethics, whether the situation on the ground was reflected also by the people who interviewed you, and whether they were kind of hiding it or whether they were fairly transparent about it.
And if you take stock of comparing the corporate versus startup lifestyle, what are the starkest differences between the two that someone who's thinking about jumping into a startup absolutely needs to be aware of?
The common misunderstanding or expectation is the startup environment is going to be a lot more, you're going to have a lot more freedom, and it's going to be cooler, and it's going to be, I guess, more of an adventure, and you're going to get rid of that, I guess, this corporate box that you fill in. I think what can be unsettling is to operate in an environment where things are changing potentially dramatically very quickly. So you could literally change the product, the business direction, the name of the company, the color of the logo in one evening, right? And so for some people, that's very unsettling because they're like, oh yeah, but I joined this company to do this job, and because I bought into, this mission and this core product, but now it's doing something completely different. Or they feel like the founders are turning left and right and keep changing. They're like, well, they don't know what they're doing, and they're not comfortable with that. But that's the reality. Like if they're not turning left and right, there's a problem actually, because no one got it right from day one, right? There's no a single company that started in a way and ended up with the exact same idea with the exact same product from beginning to end. So you got to expect some twists and turns. And again, in a corporate, you're going to have a fairly well defined job description, and you got to have to hold to it in a way, because if you step aside, you may be stepping over somebody else's shoes because it's someone else's job to do that other thing, right? In a corporate, there's usually never enough people and capabilities to do everything that has to be done. So it's the other way around. You're going to have to look for what is this thing we should be doing that I may not know exactly how, but I'm going to learn and I'm going to start doing it. And you have to get a lot more hands-on into doing things that need to be done, as opposed as just trying to comply and be obedient about what the job description says. So it's a lot more fluid in that sense. And again, for some people, it's unsettling because, again, they were hired to do certain things and they realize like they're being bounced around and it's uncomfortable. The other part is quite frankly, is the career progression, which is in a corporate, it's quite established. Oh, I've done a good job. I got my numbers. Therefore, I got my pay raise. I've got my bonus, and I got my new job grade because I earned it. In a startup, I guess the difference is, it's 100% linked to the performance of the business.
And how about the financial side? Here, the differences are probably the most drastic, right? So what should one expect?
There'll be a few aspects. One is your base salary, which more or less should be kind of market competitive unless you come very, very early in the venture. And therefore, you're expected even to take a huge pay cut because there's really just not enough work. And usually you would do it if you're the founder because you're going to have a vast majority of the shares and therefore there's a big upside later on. But if you join as an employee, and that was my case, I got paid like market price roughly. And the upside was for me to jump out of a corporate and join a company with that level of uncertainty was obviously having shares in the business. And therefore, if I helped made it work because I was part of the management team, obviously I'll get some significant upside out of it. But you got to think, obviously, what is not cash in a startup, could be nothing, right? So your shares, when they vest, the amount, all that stuff, you could argue doesn't make a lot of difference if it's not in your pocket at the end of the month. So what you make, the cash compensation has to allow to kind of live your day-to-day life. So if it's heavily discounted, the risk is, well, you're not going to be able to hold very long, so you cannot stay in the job because you just can't afford to have such a big discount on your salary. And you got to want to work hard because you want that upside that will change potentially, quite a bit in the future, your kind of lifestyle. And again, not even talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars that you could make later on, but it could be a nice upside. But generally, unless your company, your startup is really successful, if you look at the pure cash, chances are you're gonna miss out compared to a career in corporate. Interestingly, at a certain level of seniority, where you get also shares, let's say it's a public company and you get shares like long-term incentive and you get your bonus and you get your salary increment and all that stuff. If you accumulate all that over the years, and if I look at, in the end, my experience where, I ended up getting, I think, 3 months of full salary, and then I spent another 6 months capping my salary, so reducing my salary so I could pay the team when things started to go downhill, and then another 6 months of no salary at all. Well, and obviously losing all my shares in the end. If I compare to my friends who say, well, yeah, I told you, like, salary wasn't safe, right? You went out to corporate and this is your loss, right? Now, yeah, financially, not the best deal ever. But the experience, I think, was extremely interesting, rewarding. I learned a lot in the process. But yeah, financially, I can't say it was a massive success, for sure.
So 2 questions. The first one is, if you do look for a job afterwards, so after having been to a corporate, done a startup, like if the startup doesn't work out, what to expect in terms of pay if you're back to the job market? What would be your starting point?
That's a good one. The problem I'll be honest, I think is, the conversation you're going to have with HR during your job interview, and they're going to try to assess, okay, what's your total compensation now? And you're going to say, well, that's how much cash I got, but I had all these shares and I had all these future upside. And they tend to discount it. They tend to say, well, yeah, but they're shares, okay, but you didn't get them, right? So what you're worth is the cash that your company was paying you. And if you accepted a heavy discount on your salary, they're going to use it as the base because they don't know better. They don't understand. I can tell you one of the conversation I had was quite interesting because I ran my own business for a little while in between the startup and starting my own. And obviously I was paying myself the absolute minimum I needed, and it was miserable for my seniority. So I jokingly told the HR, well, this is how much I'm paying myself now. But she couldn't comprehend. She's like, it's not even what a young graduate would make. I was like, well, yeah, because this is the revenue I'm bringing to my company, but I'm only using, this amount for my salary because I need to keep some in the business for the cash flow. You cannot have this conversation with HR. It just doesn't work. They don't compute it. They don't understand it. So again, that's why first is I'll say, if you join an established startup or kind of established, don't accept a massive discount on your salary, because what you accept as a discount will be really hard to get back in the corporate world, and it won't be very easy to value it and to go back into your true value on the market because they have no real reference, and that's a problem.
And the second question that I had, obviously you have mentioned that, okay, financially not the best deal, but experience is amazing. So where did this experience leave you emotionally? Did you ever regret, for example, leaving Accenture, or were you like, nope, that was worth it, and actually I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to figure it out, and that was the right decision for me, despite all this financial downside?
Yeah, so the quick summary is, so I left, during my Accenture days, I invested quite a significant amount of money in doing the executive MBA and joining a startup, which, I lost money through the startup. Then I did a bit of independent consulting for like not even a year. I recovered all the money lost through the process, so it worked really well. But it's not what I wanted to do. And then I decided to reinvest again everything into building my own startup. And I lost that again. I have no problem saying, look, I've invested in my education. I've invested even in my career pivot, joining a startup. I would not have done it otherwise. Yeah, it cost money, but I think absolutely no regrets on what I've learned. I think what I was able to discover also about, myself and others, the people I met and the experience, it goes far beyond the financial case. And again, I recovered that money. If I had stayed in a corporate job and like continued to climb the corporate ladder, that would have been way less hectic. I would have maybe in totality made a bit more money, but I don't think I would have been as happy as I am now with what I can do and what I do today. So no regret whatsoever. But yeah, you got to be ready to do the roller coaster a little bit.
Yeah. Perfect. I think it's a perfect moment to go into the third pillar of entrepreneurship. Can you tell me about your entrepreneurial experiences so far? And I guess what business learnings have you gained off the back of this experience that you can tell to others who may be interested in pursuing an entrepreneurial path?
There are different ways to, to start a business. So a few years ago, with a co-founder, we started a retail tech business. It was a product led. So it was a SaaS platform. It was a lot about building a product. For me, it was also discovering a brand new industry, retail and FMCG. I didn't know much about, but mostly it was about data, AI, and tech. And that was something I was comfortable for. And my co-founder was from the industry. So we had that, fairly well covered. My second experience was, purely being, an independent consultant and advisor, and work as I'm working now as a fractional CTO for different clients, so startup and bigger corporations. I think the difference is, first of all, you go back to being a nobody, right? So you can have a business card with a logo nobody knows. You have a great title, you're kind of co-founder, CTO, C, whatever, but reality is you're the CEO of yourself. So stay humble in that sense. In a big corporate, you'll be VP of something, and you'll have some perks that come along with it. When you're on your own, I think what's fascinating is you cannot hide behind a logo. You cannot hide behind a title. And you got to deliver. So you got to do what you say you can do. You got to walk the talk. And then the economics of what you do are very simple. Either what you do works and people value your work and you get paid, or you don't, and then you don't get paid, and therefore you cannot survive doing this. So it's very clear, either you do a good job and you can live off it, or you can't, and you quickly have to find something else to do because either it pays or it doesn't. And I like maybe it's very raw, right? But I like the fact that I guess people value the work I do, and that's why they pay me for, right? So why I invoice my clients at the end of the month, I got to wonder, did I really do what I said I'll do? Did I really earn that money? Did I create that much value? And what's interesting is, from a client perspective, every time they receive my invoice, they're like, did I get what I wanted of this guy? But in a corporate, it's different, right? Your boss never see your salary or your paycheck coming out, right? It's all kind of in the background, automated. So they never challenge you every month to say, did this guy actually really earn his salary this month, right? But for a client, it's every time you send an invoice, they're going to say, am I paying the right price for this, right? And I think it's very healthy. Now, it's challenging because at any point of time, they say, I don't think I got what I wanted this month. So you're on the fence. You're on your toes every time. But I think it's quite healthy because it keeps you very challenged to deliver the best you can to your clients every day. And to me, that's very stimulating. You cannot deliver below expectation and quality, or at least not too long, because it's going to be very easy for them to just shut you down. Personally, I like it. For some people, again, quite uncomfortable. I get that, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to touch upon is mindset. Obviously, you and I have spoken about your dear hobby that's dear to your heart. It's ultra trail running. Can you tell me what does this hobby teach you about the mindset that actually is helping you within your entrepreneurial journey as well?
Ultra running is a lot of managing the unexpected. You don't know the terrain up front. You don't know your physical and mental conditions. You don't know the weather. All this stuff will affect how you're gonna be able to manage a race. But with the right level of training, the right level of mental prep and physical prep, and with experience, you tend to be able to manage these highly uncertain experiments, if I may. So what I like is it's almost like a way to regain control over a situation that seems to be extremely uncertain. So it got me to think, in a startup, again, same. There's a lot of external factors that will play against you that you're going to have to manage. So the question is, how you manage the unexpected in that environment is very similar from my perspective, how you look at training for a race. You build the mental resilience and you build the muscle to handle ideally any situation that's going to be thrown at you. It's going to be painful. Yes, expect that. The terrain's going to be unexpected. It could be wet. It could be muddy. It could be slippery. It could be rocky. And you face all that stuff in a startup environment. And I think when you pass, the one step at a time, you get to the next checkpoint and you realize like you're progressing through the race and you're getting better at it. You got to celebrate the small milestones in a way, and I think in a startup is the same. You got to celebrate things that are, that seems to be, that are achievable, right? Again, in a race, when you start and you're like, oh, it's 100 kilometers and you already completed 1 kilometer and you have 99 to go, it's really hard to kind of put in your head, I have 99 to go. But if you say, look, the next checkpoint is actually at 10K, I only have 9K left, it's a lot easier, right? So the way I manage a race is I kind of divide it up in like different buckets, different segments. And I think in a startup, if you want to keep your teams engaged, you cannot say, oh, we are very far from being $1 billion company. So you got to set some intermediate milestones that make it more digestible, I guess, easier to grasp for the team to say, let's celebrate, the first customer. Let's celebrate, the launch of this new feature. And you got to celebrate that. You keep in mind the big picture, but you also celebrate some milestones that you have in between. I think that's quite important, and build that resilience to keep focus on the bigger picture as well. Then that's what you're striving for at the back.
Amazing. And to wrap up, what would be the final piece of advice or a tip that you would leave someone with who is feeling a bit stuck or unfulfilled in their career and is wondering what to do next?
Well, there's a time to think and evaluate options, but I think sometimes not doing anything is actually the wrong decision in the first place. So if you're not happy in what you do, just do something about it. trigger change, make the change happen. Don't wait for change to be imposed upon you, because then that's what we were saying earlier. That's where it gets really tricky. So action trumps indecision, right? In effect. So you just do something, just do it. I remember so it's been years now, I wanted to start, a newsletter platform and started to kind of put together some words. And I realized, like, I kept reading what others people were publishing, but I had like that, I don't know, phobia, I guess, of the blank page. And the moment you start writing, you start being in that mode where you're in control. You're the one actually doing now. You stop thinking, you stop dreaming, you actually do stuff. And I think it's extremely valuable to start doing things, because you start to realize it's not that complicated. What you thought was impossible is actually very simple.
Damien, thank you so much for being here with me today. Really enjoyed our conversation, and good luck on your journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Vaya, for having me. Great conversation. Appreciate it.